Layla never expected that a single encounter with a mysterious stranger would change her life forever. Working the night shift at Rosie's Diner, a modest eatery tucked away on the corner of two quiet streets in Chicago's Old District, had always been part of her routine. The unassuming place, with its neon sign casting a warm glow that reflected in the puddles on the rain-soaked pavement, had become a second home to her. For a 25-year-old waitress with keen brown eyes and a soft, encouraging smile, the diner was more than just a job. It was a refuge, a place where regulars knew her name, where every cup of coffee came with a kind word, and the scent of freshly baked apple pie reminded her that warmth could exist even on the rainiest nights. This evening began like any other. People escaping the downpour filled the usual wooden tables, chatting and ordering their favorite meals. The bell above the door jingled, and Layla instinctively glanced up, greeting the new customer with her familiar smile. But her words caught in her throat. A man stood in the doorway, shaking raindrops from his black coat. His tall figure, slightly hunched from the heavy rain, seemed like a piece of the street scene he had just left behind. But this wasn't just any ordinary customer. His long, rain-dampened hair framed a face Layla instantly recognized. Her heart skipped a beat. It was him, Keanu Reeves, the famous actor whose movies she had watched countless times. His presence was undeniable even in simple jeans and a black sweater. Keanu quickly scanned the diner, searching for the most inconspicuous seat before settling in a corner, far from the windows and curious eyes. Layla took a deep breath, trying to steady the surge of emotions. She had always admired Keanu, not just as an actor, but as a person known for his many good deeds. Children's hospitals, charities for the needy. He was a hero both on and off the screen. And now he was here, in her little diner, and she had to serve him like any other customer. Keeping her composure, Layla approached his table. "Good evening," she said, her smile a little wider than usual. "What can I get for you?" Keanu looked up. His gaze was gentle, but weary, as if he were searching for a brief escape from the world. "Just a black coffee," he replied, his voice low and calm. He glanced toward the dessert display. "And maybe a slice of apple pie, if that's all right." "Of course," Layla answered, proud that her voice didn't tremble. As she moved to the counter to prepare his order, she sensed the shift in the diner's atmosphere. The patrons, now aware of Keanu Reeves' presence, exchanged glances and whispered among themselves, trying to remain discreet. All except for one person. Earl, a longtime regular who had been coming every evening for years, was never one to keep his opinions to himself. Always perched in his usual seat by the counter with a cup of strong black coffee in hand, he watched Keanu with a scowling gaze. His weathered face, etched with deep wrinkles and a stern expression, conveyed clear disapproval. Finally, Earl let out a loud, dismissive snort, breaking the tense silence. "Well, well," he drawled, rising from his stool. His voice was gruff, like the creak of an old door. "If it isn't Mr. Hollywood himself gracing us with his presence." Layla froze, setting down the plate with the pie she had been about to deliver. Earl slowly made his way to Keanu's table, ignoring the concerned look she gave him. "Must be nice, huh?" Earl continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Living in your big mansion while regular folks can barely make ends meet." Keanu lifted his eyes to meet Earl's. His expression remained composed and his voice was remarkably gentle. "Everyone has their struggles," he said softly. "We're all just doing our best to get by." But Earl wasn't finished. "Struggles," he scoffed loudly. "I've read about people like you. All that money, and what do you do with it? buy fancy cars and private jets. Bet you've never worked an honest day in your life." The diner seemed to hold its breath. Layla's hands shook as she gripped the plate of pie. She wanted to say something, to intervene, but no words came. The customers watched the unfolding scene in tense silence, unsure of how to react. Layla gathered her things with trembling hands, fighting back tears that threatened to spill down her cheeks. She felt a storm of anger, humiliation, and pain churning inside her. As she walked through the diner, she could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her, some filled with sympathy, others with curiosity, and a few, like Earl's, with thinly veiled amusement. At the door, she caught a glimpse of Keanu rising from his seat and stepping toward the counter to pay. Layla stepped outside, where the rain continued to patter lightly on the pavement. She took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure, but the tears finally broke free. "Layla!" Her name, spoken softly yet firmly, cut through the rain. She turned to see Keanu Reeves standing in the doorway of the diner, holding an umbrella that shielded him and part of the steps from the rain. "I'm sorry for what happened," he said, his eyes deep with sincerity and gratitude. "You shouldn't have had to endure that." "It's not your fault," Layla tried to smile, but it came out as more of a grimace. "Sometimes people just don't want the truth." Keanu took a step forward, his gaze steady, a faint smile touching his lips. "But you spoke it anyway. That takes courage. Thank you for that." She nodded, words eluding her. It was a brief but profound moment. He gave her another warm smile before heading toward his car, disappearing into the night and leaving Layla standing in the rain, her heart swirling with conflicting emotions. The next morning, Layla was jolted awake by the shrill ring of her phone. Her first instinct was to ignore it, but the persistent sound tore through her sleep. "Hello," she mumbled, barely conscious. "Miss Layla Harper?" The voice on the other end was professional but friendly. "Yes, this is she," she said, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. "My name is Emily. I'm with a production company. Keanu Reeves passed along your information. He was impressed with how you stood your ground last night." Layla sat bolt upright, her heart thudding. "We're working on a documentary project," Emily continued, "about everyday heroes, people who find the courage to stand up for truth and justice in challenging situations. We'd love to offer you a position as a research coordinator." "I'm sorry, what?" Layla could hardly believe her ears. "It's a full-time role with great benefits, and we'd assist with relocation if needed," Emily clarified. "Keanu believes your perspective on life and your ability to recognize true kindness would be invaluable to us. Are you interested?" For a moment, Layla was speechless. She looked at her hands, still remembering how they had closed her locker at the diner last night, thinking her future had crumbled. "Yes," she finally whispered, her voice quivering with excitement. "Yes, I'm interested." 2 hours later, Layla stepped into Rosie's diner again, but this time not in her waitress uniform. She wore simple but neat clothes, holding a to-go coffee cup in her hand. As the door closed behind her, the bell chimed, drawing everyone's attention. Earl sat in his usual spot by the counter. When his eyes met hers, his expression shifted from smug confidence to visible discomfort. Layla walked to the counter, aware that every head in the room had turned her way. "Hello, Earl," she greeted, with a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Earl muttered something under his breath, looking away. "Surprised to see me again?" she asked, feeling her confidence grow. "Sometimes, when one door closes, another one opens." She glanced around the familiar interior of the diner, feeling its grip on her loosen. She had a new chapter ahead of her, one where her voice would be heard and valued. Layla took a sip of her coffee and walked out of the diner, leaving Earl and his uneasy expression behind. Mr. Sullivan froze behind the counter, his usually confident face betraying an inner conflict. He had not expected to see Layla again, especially under these circumstances. "Layla." His voice was quiet, almost unsure. I've been thinking about what happened that night." Without lingering on his words, Layla placed the neatly folded uniform on the counter. "I came to return this," she said calmly, adding with a slight smile, "and to thank you." Sullivan blinked, clearly confused. "Thank me?" he repeated, furrowing his brow. "Yes." Layla folded her hands in front of her. "Because if you hadn't fired me for doing the right thing, I wouldn't have been offered my dream job." Her voice was steady, but it carried the confidence that had stayed with her since that morning. She smiled, feeling as though a heavy weight had finally lifted from her shoulders. "Sometimes losing something small opens the door to something much bigger," she added. The diner fell silent. The regular patrons, who were accustomed to witnessing every minor drama, paused, absorbing her words. Even Earl, who usually smirked at others' misfortunes, sat quietly, avoiding her gaze. Layla glanced around the room, her tone becoming warmer and more sincere. "It's easy to judge people, especially those in the spotlight. But kindness matters." She paused to let her words sink in. "No matter if you're famous or not. And sometimes standing up for what's right is the most important thing." Her words echoed in the diner's silence, but no one dared to respond. Layla took one last look at the place that had been a significant part of her life and stepped into the rainy evening, leaving behind an entire chapter of her story. In the following months, Layla fully immersed herself in her new job. The team she now worked with was truly inspiring. They gathered stories about ordinary people performing extraordinary acts, teachers spending their own money on students' needs, neighbors helping the elderly during disasters, teenagers standing up to bullies. Each story reminded Layla of that rainy night in the diner when she had chosen not to stay silent. A year after her dismissal, the series they created premiered. The documentary, titled Ordinary People, shared stories of courage that often went unnoticed. Layla sat in a packed theater, watching the screen as the credits rolled. Although she had protested against having her name listed as a co-producer, Keanu had insisted. "You inspired this," he had told her at the premiere. "Sometimes the courage of one person can spark a chain reaction of kindness. You proved that." Layla recalled her own words about the importance of standing up for truth, even if it costs you everything. Now, she truly understood how right she had been. Looking back, Layla realized that losing her job at Rosie's Diner had not been an end, but a beginning. That night, filled with rain and tension, had shown her that even the smallest acts of bravery can lead to something greater. She understood that sometimes the most significant changes in life stem from moments when you choose to protect someone in need. And in defending someone's honor, you might just find yourself exactly where you were meant to be.